Hey guys! Alright, so this is the first of my false prints videos. So I'm very excited about this. I'm so excited to finally find out how Jaren became Sage, how Sage became Jaren. These next two chapters are going to really explain that. Today I'm only going to be reading chapter 42. So, chapter 42. Oh, it's backwards. That's okay. Chapter 42. In the website that we just sent to your parents, that hopefully this is how you're viewing the videos. There is a packet for the false prints. The first part of the packet, you'll see it's chapters 35 through 42. You have done every single chapter besides chapter 42 already. So don't worry about doing that. Okay, just do the chapter 42 questions after we finish, or I finish reading this chapter. After I'm done, I will go through the questions with you guys, all right? I will explain them. If you have any questions, have your mom or dad email me, and we will get those set, all right? So, are you guys ready? Here we go. Chapter 42. Jaren Artolius Ecbert III of Carthia was the second son of Ecbert and Erin, king and queen of Carthia. All of the regents agreed it would have been better if this child had been a daughter rather than a son. A daughter could have married into the kingdom of Gelen as a measure of preserving peace. Nor was the young prince particularly impressive as a royal. He was smaller in stature than his brother had been, had a talent for causing trouble, and appeared to favor his left hand, a quality frowned upon for Carthian royalty. Privately, Erin cherished her second son. Now, why would she be doing this privately? This is an issue because he has so many things that the regents don't like. He's left-handed. He's a troublemaker. So the fact that Erin actually liked her son, she had to do this in a way that other people wouldn't see. So that's why it says that she privately cherished her second son. Okay? The older child, Darius, was already being trained as a future king. He had belonged to the state from the moment of his birth and fit the role well. He was decisive, controlled, and detached, at least to his mother. But less was expected of Jaren, and he could always be a little bit more hers. So because Darius was being trained to be a king, his dad took a lot of his respect and a lot of his time and energy. So Queen Erin wasn't able to love and dote on and just really kind of spoil, I guess, her older son because he was so focused on becoming the king. Jaren wasn't that way. She was able to care for her son in a way that she wasn't able to care for Darius. Erin never had felt comfortable as Queen of Carthia. It required her to hide much of her true spirit and zest for adventure. Indeed, engaging in a secret romance with young Ecbert had been the greatest adventure in her youth. She hadn't paused to consider the consequences until it was too late and she was in love. Erin had served drinks in a small tavern at Perth for a year, working off the debts her father had acquired after becoming seriously ill while at sea. It was humiliating work. Until then, their family had enjoyed a fair social status, and she had enough education to know how far they had sunk. But Erin endured it, and eventually the tavern began to prosper under her guidance. Ecbert spotted her one night when he and his attendants traveled through Perth. He returned the second night in disguise, enchanted by her beauty, charm, and loyalty to her family. By the third night, Erin had figured out who Ecbert really was. He begged her to keep his secret, only so that he could continue to see her again. At the end of the week, Egbert paid off her father's debts with extra to the tavern owner on a royal command that he must never reveal Erin's humble origins. He brought Erin back with him to Gilead and made her his queen. In marriage, Egbert and Erin were happy, but as king and queen, they disagreed on how to rule Carthia. Erin saw enemies in the faces of those Egbert sought to appease with favorable trade laws and by ignoring clear violations of treaties. Their older son, Darius, would one day have to bear the consequences of Egbert's fear of conflict. Jaron would be given more freedom to pursue his own desires, and Erin loved him for that. Jaron was still very young when it became clear that he was his mother's child more than his father's. The fire he set in the throne room was not malicious. He had taken a bet from a friend, a castle page, that tapestries could burn. He intended to prove it by burning only a hidden corner of the tapestry. Over 300 years of threaded history went up in flames before servants were able to put the fire out. Commoners also loved the story of Jaron, at age 10, challenging the king of Mendenwall to a duel. None of them knew that Jaron had overheard the king accuse Queen Erin of not being a true royal. They only laughed at the image of a 10-year-old boy facing off with a king 4 times his age. The Mendenwall king humorously obliged Jaron and undoubtedly restrained him during the duel. Although the king easily won the match, Jaron satisfied himself that he did give the king a nasty cut on the thigh, and he practiced his sword fighting twice as hard from then on. How cool is that? A 10-year-old, so someone who's younger than all of you guys, was able to actually injure a king, royalty. That's pretty impressive. I don't care who you are. I would be seriously impressed. As Jaron grew, Egbert became increasingly angry and embarrassed by his son's antics. Instead of compressing himself into a model royal as his father wished, Jaron rebelled even further. He snuck out of his bedroom window at night, as often as the weather permitted, and on too many occasions when the bad weather should have discouraged him. Heights never bothered Jaron, not even after the time he fell more than 10 feet from a tower and had his life saved by an acrotarian at the edge of the gable. He learned to scale the exterior rock walls with his bare hands and feet. Few people ever knew of that because the only person to ever catch Jaron was his older brother. Jaron never understood why Darius kept his many offenses quiet. Perhaps because Darius knew he'd one day be king and hoped Jaron wouldn't embarrass him as well. Or because Darius wanted to spare his father the rumors that would swell throughout Carthia and abroad over how a king who couldn't control his own son could possibly control a kingdom. It never occurred to Jaron that Darius loved him and protected him so that he could have the life Darius never could. In your minds, think, is Darius jealous of Jaron? Why would he be jealous? He is going to be king after all, right? Jaron doesn't get to be king, so why would Darius be jealous of Jaron? Something to think about, huh? In fact, Jaron never fully understood that anyone in his family, other than his mother, truly loved him until it was too late and they were already dead. Shortly before his 11th birthday, Jaron's parents called him for a private council. Both Gellin and Avinia pressed at Carthia's borders, threatening a war. The regents were in an uproar, threatening to depose Egbert if he didn't push their enemies back. Jaron was a distraction for the country, and something had to be done. Egbert had found a school up north in the country of Weimar for Jaron to attend. It would give him an excellent education and teach him proper decorum for a prince. So, Egbert is thinking about sending Jaren away to a school. He's doing this because he doesn't want to be distracted by all that Jaren is doing right now. You know, he's a troublemaker. He's setting stuff on fire. He's sneaking out, which, I mean, to be fair, Egbert doesn't know about, but he's still doing all these things that Egbert would be very upset. So, Egbert and Aaron are trying to decide what to do with Jaren while this is happening, all right? Jaren angrily protested. No one wants to be sent away from their family, right? Can you imagine, like, just because you're doing things that you're not supposed to do, your parents would just kick you out? It's not quite fair, right? You would be just as upset as Jaren. He swore to his father that if he tried to send him to Weimar, he would run away and never be found again. Egbert retaliated, telling Jaren that if he did not go, it could mean the end for Carthia. He had to prove to both his own country and to the enemies at his border that he could be decisive. He would send his own son away and end the embarrassment. Aaron pled with Jaren to accept Egbert's decision, to do it for Carthia, to do it for her. I will do it for you, Mother, Jaren had said. I'll leave you for your own sake, but you will never see me again. He hadn't meant those words. He was angry and felt horrible, even as the threat tumbled from his mouth. But he also hurt in a way he couldn't describe. Enemies weren't at Carthia's border because of him. They were there because his father had looked the other way for far too long. Perhaps there were Carthians who laughed at the prince's latest antics, but they would stand by their king when he called them. So, we've talked about universality in our class before, right? Something that something that anybody, anywhere, can understand. Jaren just said something that he didn't mean. It was one of those things that as soon as he said it, he wished he could grab it and put it back into his mouth, right? I know I've had tons of situations like that where it's like, I didn't mean to say that. And I know that you guys have had those kinds of instances too. So in the packet where it's talking about universality, there's a really good example of that. All right. Jaren left the very next day, rather quietly. There was no farewell supper, no grand entourage to accompany him to the docks at Isel. Only a few officers would journey with him to Avenia, then across the Arenbull Sea to the gates of Weimar. Jaren got on board the ship and immediately complained of rolling seasickness, despite the fact that the ship hadn't even left the harbor. A calming medicine was offered to him, and it was recommended that Jaren go to his room below decks to rest. Jaren never took the medicine, and it was no easy matter for him to slip out of the small porthole in his room. Still, he had a smaller build than most 10-year-old boys, and after he worked his shoulders free, the rest was simple. Unaware that Jaren had left, the ship set sail without him. The ship was attacked by pirates late that afternoon. So, Jaren never even got on the boat, and which is interesting, right? Because the rumor was that he got attacked by the pirates, which is what happened, but he wasn't actually on the ship. Pretty interesting, huh? When news of the piracy returned to Carthia, a search was made for any survivors. There were none. All of them killed in fighting the pirates or drowned at sea. Because Jaren's body was never found, a search was made throughout Avenia and Carthia for any hope of his survival. Before long, most people believed he had joined dozens of others in the ship at the bottom of the sea. So because there was no body, everyone thought, he must be dead. But alas, he was not. Safely on land, Jaren quickly found he had skills that enabled him to blend in with Avenians. He was good with accents and had studied enough of foreign cultures to move amongst them like a native. He pickpocketed for spare coins or worked odd jobs wherever he found them. Still, he went hungry most days and spent his nights huddled in the shadows, hoping to go unnoticed by the street thugs who patrolled the darkness. It was Darius who found Jaren first. Jaren had dropped a coin in an offerings dish at a church. The priest there recognized the young prince and sent word to Darius, who was known to be searching for his brother in a nearby town. To stall for time, the priest kindly told Jaren he had some extra food, and if Jaren agreed to wash the church steps, he could stay the night. Now, that is insight. It gives us an idea as to why the priest is doing what he's doing. He knows something that Jaren doesn't. He knows that Darius is in the other town searching for him. So, because he knows that, he's keeping Jaren at his church for as long as he can. This is something that is called insight. And again, this is stuff that we've talked about. Insight. Inside. It gives us a look into what the character is doing and why they're doing it. Make sense? Cool. Darius arrived early the next morning, alone. Over a small breakfast with Jaren, Darius described the suffering of their parents who had tortured themselves over having lost their son. Jaren dissolved into tears and said he would gladly return home if his parents would allow him to come. Darius told him to stay at the church and he would ask their father what should be done. Darius left Jaren in his room, thanked the priest for his services, but informed him that, sadly, the young boy was not the lost prince of Carthia. However, he expressed his pity for the boy and paid the priest to continue to watch over him for another week. 1 week later, Jaren would finally begin to understand his role in the future of Carthia. Okay, that's where we're going to leave it today. So that's the end of chapter 42. That's just giving us a little bit of insight as to how Jaren became sage. Let's look at the chapter 42 questions. Now, this does not have to be done on the packet. If you would rather watch the video and write it on just a regular piece of paper, that's totally fine. This is not going to be collected in any way, but this is helping you think about the story in a different way, all right? So the chapter 42 question, and I'm sorry I'm not looking at the camera, I'm looking at the packet on my computer, okay? The first question is asking us to compare and contrast Prince Jaren that is described in this chapter to Sage. How is this Prince Jaren different from Sage, okay? So there's 2 spots, so I want you to find 2 ways that Prince Jaren is different and 2 ways that Sage is different. We know that they're the same person, but they act very differently, okay? Then the next one is talking about precise language, emotional appeal, universality, and insight. We've talked about this all year. You know exactly what this is, all right? Precise language, it's description. Where did you find precise language in this chapter, okay? It is supposed to be for any of the chapters for that packet, but you guys don't have the book, and that's totally okay. So, and obviously I'm not looking for exact examples, okay? You can just tell me, oh, there was description in how Queen Erin loved her son, right? We had a lot of description. If you need to rewind the video, feel free, all right? Emotional appeal. Did you feel anything? I know there was a lot going on, like arguing between parents and children. You can see how Prince Aaron, excuse me, I'm sorry, Queen Erin is feeling about Sage. Does that make you feel anything? If so, that's emotional appeal. Universality, I gave you a huge example of that. Insight, I gave you an example of that as well. Okay? The next thing that I want you to do is come up with a newspaper article, okay? Come up with a headline that is talking about Prince Jaren's death, okay? Now, you guys know that Jaren is not actually dead. However, the people that you are writing this newspaper for does not know this, all right? So, come up with a headline. Prince Jaron dead, or something similar to that, okay? You want to answer the questions in your article. Who, what, when, where, how. All of those need to be answered. So, I highly recommend that you do what you do in Miss Shorts. 5 to